In September 1977, Woman magazine in the UK published an article about The Muppet Show, which was just about to air its second season. They talked to Frank Oz about Miss Piggy, and this is when he was just keying into the complexity of this character. And he said, the thing most people don't realize about Miss Piggy is how much that lady suffered. My God, has she suffered. And it's made her very promiscuous, you know. She's had affairs with most of the male Muppets, except of course Kermit, the one she really wants. She continues to suffer and to live in hopes. It's all very, very sad. So there you go. That is Muppet canon, direct from Frank Oz. As of the second season of The Muppet Show, Miss Piggy has had affairs with most of the male Muppets except for Kermit. On the other hand, Frank Oz says a lot of things.
I can't give you anything but love, baby. That's the only thing I've plenty of, baby.
Kissy kissy, and welcome to another episode of the Fantastic Miss Piggy podcast. I'm Danny Horn, and this podcast chronicles my journey to learn everything there is to know about that divine swine, the incomparable Miss Piggy. And today I am convinced that I'm going to get closer to my goal because I'm going to introduce my special guest, who I believe might know some stuff about Miss Piggy, and he is here to tell us all about it. Craig Shemin is a longtime Jim Henson Company staff writer and the president of the Jim Henson Legacy. He's written television shows and live shows and CD-ROM games. He wrote the Muppets Character Encyclopedia and the amazing book about the early years of the Muppets, Sam and Friends, the story of Jim Henson's first television show. So here is the fascinating and marvelous Craig Shemin. Kissy kissy, Craig. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great to be here.
I'm so happy to see you. There's a bunch of stuff I didn't mention. You've done a lot of stuff, and I'm going to pretend to be interested in all of it, but I'm going to mostly pay attention to the Miss Piggy parts.
That's quite all right.
Now, with the Jim Henson Legacy, how long have you been the president?
I guess I've been the president a little more than 10 years or so. I've been, I think, a board member since about 2002 or so, 2001. It's sort of the years sort of blur after a while.
A while ago.
And it's been really rewarding. Jane Henson really had an enormous foresight to establish this organization because she saw that the different companies involved with the characters would keep their particular interests alive.
Right.
But she wanted to make sure that Jim was not forgotten as the guy who came up with the Muppets and all of the Henson characters. So she did that, and then so because of that, we are able to present things all together in a way that Henson and Disney and Sesame really can't. So a few years back, we did a big concert in New Zealand where we were able to get characters from all the different character groups on one stage, and that's been a lot of fun.
And you've been an important historian for the Muppets for a long time now, writing the Sam and Friends book, for one, which is incredible, just going deep into all of the facts that you figured out about it and really understanding like Henson's early days, but also the museum tours and screenings that you've done, kind of bringing awareness of Henson's work.
It's been really exciting because there are so many people as we get farther away from Jim Henson's, actual career during his lifetime. We have to work harder to make sure that people are aware of exactly what he did and what was special about it. And I think it's, to me, it's not just about celebrating Jim Henson, but it's also about inspiring new artists. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to do the Sam and Friends book, because this is a story about Jim Henson when he was in high school and college.
Right.
And this is something that young artists can relate to really well. And so what I talk about whenever I do these presentations is this is what Jim Henson did when he was 17, 18, 19, 20. Why aren't you doing this? It was so much harder back then. You didn't have YouTube and you didn't have television production in the palm of your hand.
Right.
So if Jim did all this, imagine what you can do. And it really does inspire young artists, I think.
How did you get your start with Henson?
I started as an intern. I was in my junior year of college at Northwestern University. I was trying to figure out what to do with my summer vacation. And I happened to see a documentary on called Henson's Place. I think a lot of Henson fans will be familiar with it. And it started, you got to see a little bit of the office and the behind the scenes. And I'm saying, well, maybe that would be a great place to do an internship. And I was a big Henson fan when I was, 10 years old was
Yeah.
when the Muppet Show, I was 10 when the Muppet Show came on.
Perfect age.
Yeah. And I was, 13 when Muppet Movie came out. And I was one of those kids who would go to a library and look up magazines and microfilm about the Muppets to try and figure out how they worked. And so I was a big fan. And it was a slight bit of dormancy when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm thinking, well, gee, this is something I'm really interested in. Imagine getting a chance to work at a place that does this. So I called up the Henson Associates office, as it was called back then. I got information from the directory assistance operator and called up the next day, and they scheduled an appointment for me to come in during spring break and meet with the intern person. They didn't really have a big intern program, but they had me come in, and I met with them. And I spent that summer interning for the public relations department and also doing a little bit of work with the Henson archives. There wasn't a full-time archivist at that time.
So what were you doing there?
Basically, I was just making sure that people weren't throwing things out. I would try and go around to the different departments and say, "Oh, I need this and this for the archives. Make sure you send your scripts." So it was just trying to make sure there were things. Bob Payne, who had started on Sam and Friends era, he had started the archives, and he was no longer at the company by the time I got there in 1987. So it was just a matter of trying to keep things going. And I was just a summer intern, so I really didn't have any authority over anything. But that was the summer I met Jim Henson at the company softball game, and Frank Oz on the same day. Yeah, and it was a wonderful summer. I spent most of it just answering the phones and taking messages and things like that. Don't want people to think that I was thrust into this magnificently glamorous world.
Yeah, but still being in, and then that gave you an in to come back. How did you?
Yeah, absolutely. I happened to be working for a woman who kept on losing assistants. So it seemed like every time I was getting ready to come home for a break, she had just lost an assistant. So I would come in and I got some part-time work during my.
That's got to be a little. You got to be a little suspicious at that point.
Well, yeah. But I was so passionate to get in there, and like, yeah, sure, I'll come work for you for a couple of weeks. And then, as it happened, she hired me to take that position when I graduated.
And so you were in public relations department.
I was, yeah, and that's when I started writing for the characters, because I would be assigned to write the character interviews for the magazines and newspapers for the characters, but also sometimes for Jim.
Really?
If there was a smaller market newspaper or something, they had an interview they wanted to do Jim, they'd send their questions. I'd write the responses. We'd send them up to Jim to get an approval or to answer a question that I really didn't have an answer for. Something like, what's your most satisfying experience as a parent? I was like, I can't really speak for Jim in that. I could tell you when he made Kermit, but,
Right.
So we would send and get Jim to revise things. And same thing for the character interviews. We would send them to whichever performer was involved and just have them sign off on it.
I've always been curious about those character interviews because I love them and loved them as a kid. I think, like you were saying, like going and looking up in the microfilm, like for me, Miss Piggy in Red Book and Women's Day. I've kind of always wondered about who writes them, and it's funny that you kind of as just a new employee were doing
Well,
them.
I didn't really get a chance to start doing that until a few months. It might have been as much of a year.
Yeah.
Then, but I was not a typical new employee because I knew a lot about Henson going in, being a fan, and I was sort of proving to people, it's like, yeah, and Jane Henson would ask me questions about dates and things because she knew that I came in to it as a fan. Most people working at the Henson Company did not come to it through there. The people working in licensing and publishing were not there because they were enormous fans of Henson going into it. they were going into it because they work in licensing and they work in publishing, and this was the job that they had an opportunity to get. And so I was going into it from a completely different perspective. So they gave me a little bit more leeway to develop material for the characters than anyone else. And I did that in association with Jim Lewis, who was sort of the main staff writer to do that sort of thing. He had come over from Muppet Magazine. He had been the editor of Muppet Magazine. So Jim Lewis, Bill Prady was doing a lot more work in production. So it really fell to Jim Lewis to do a lot of the licensing and publication stuff. And then as I started doing more, there was a time when Bill left to go to L.A., and then Jim took over most of that New York stuff. And then Bill left the company, and Jim went to L.A., and then I took over Jim's position. That's when I left the PR department after about 3 years. But during the time I was in the PR department, I was working on the interviews, the newspaper magazine interviews, also doing some stories for the publishing department.
For like the children's books?
Yeah, well, it was there was a series of children's story cards that were being done for field publications at that time. It was like a subscription thing, kind of like recipe cards, and you get 8 Muppet stories in the mail every month and a half or so.
Yeah.
So it was like a 500-word story on a glossy cardstock with a new illustration. So I did a bunch of those. And then they got compiled into a book later on.
How did you get into writing each character?
The best research is to watch the stuff and try and get into the head and figure out what each character wants and what their role is in relation to all the other characters. And some are easier than others. It's easier to write Piggy and Gonzo material than it is to write Kermit.
Why is that?
Well, there's nothing. Kermit is the guy in the middle. He's the everyman. He's not a guy who goes out to do amazing stunts. He's not big on fashion because he usually doesn't wear clothing. He's just there to get everybody else together to put on a show. And that's why when you write Kermit material, you're usually writing and mentioning the other characters and what they're doing at the moment.
And also the swamp. There's a lot of frog references.
And I think
and
that sometimes with the Kermit stuff, you end up sort of falling into this trap of doing puns and jokes, which I don't really like to do. But you need to sort of have fun material.
Something for him to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you can't get it, with Piggy and with Gonzo and Fozzie, you can get into it from their characters, from what they're experiencing at the moment. And Kermit is sort of, unless he's riled up, and you can get him riled up.
Yeah.
Unless he's riled up, he's just, he's pretty
very
normal.
calm. Yeah. How was it writing for Piggy? What made her kind of easier? Was it, she has real opinions, I guess. She has real kind of storylines.
She has real opinions. She has real moods. So you can always come into a Piggy interview just thinking about what state she's in at that very moment. You could do an interview purely based on her attitude. You could just say, well, Piggy, her hairstylist didn't show up today. How is she feeling? And you can get that out. And if you look at something like, and this was done before I was there. I don't know if you saw it when Piggy and Kermit did the Emmy Awards, and Piggy and Kermit were there to read the rules, and she thinks she's there for another reason.
Right.
And that's the attitude, is that she spent hours in hair and makeup. She doesn't want to read the rules.
And is very impatient. Yeah.
And that drives the whole thing. Just coming up with that attitude. And I will tell you that early on, one of the earliest Piggy things I wrote, I learned about this. This was an interview for Chicago Tribune's Sunday magazine. And they had a celebrity questionnaire that they would do in every issue. And they would send about 65 questions out to the celebrities, and the celebrity would fill it out. And then they would take like 14, 15 questions and put it in a little thing with a picture. And it was a big thing on the inside cover of the Sunday magazine. So they sent 65 questions, and I answered them, sent it to Frank. And Frank just crossed out a few of them. He's like, you know, Piggy doesn't have to answer all of these. And he also, it's also like Piggy, sometimes answering a question is not answering the question. Sometimes you don't have to answer the question. And the fact that you're not going to answer it is your answer. And then they can kind of like, why isn't she answering? Why doesn't she want to discuss it? It prompts things in the imagination. There was one question, was one of my favorite things that in that particular thing, and one of my favorite all-time things that Frank came up with. And the question was, when nobody's looking, I blank. And the question is written very sincerely. It's like, okay, here's something we want to find out what Miss Piggy does in private when nobody's looking. So he wrote, when nobody's looking, and Frank wrote, wave my arms up and down and yell, look at me, look at me. So it perfectly captures Piggy.
Yeah.
Takes the question in an entirely different direction. So that made me learn that when they're asking these questions, you don't have to give them an answer that they're expecting. You don't have to answer a question. You can take it in any direction you want. Piggy's responsibility to be Piggy. It's not her responsibility to sit and take a test.
Answer these questions. Yeah.
So that's where I try and take things, is you think about what Piggy's attitude is and her level of patience or impatience with this interviewer, and what does she want to say. The other thing that Frank used to get a little sensitive about is that he didn't want it to seem like Piggy was going after and flirting with interviewers or people. He wanted to make the appearance that they were flirting with her.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, because I think he figured it would be funnier. He has since been fallen out of favor, but we did a bunch of things with Matt Lauer.
Oh, yeah.
So it wasn't her flirting with Matt Lauer. It's her saying, Matthew, when we were together, you insisted that, you take me out after. It was a way of her putting him. Now, knowing what we now know about Matt Lauer, maybe not, that was not the best way to proceed, but it really, I think.
Or it was kind of more historically accurate than you knew at the time. Yeah.
Piggy, good morning. Happy New Year. Nice to see you. And thanks for getting up so early.
Yeah, whatever.
Are you not in a good mood this morning?
I'm fine, Matthew. I mean, you and I had a wonderful night last night, did we not?
It
was nice. I thank you for the corsage when you picked me up.
You're more than welcome.
But the truth is, we both know the truth, that I only agreed to do the show this morning because there was no other way to dump you.
What do you mean, dump me?
I had 6 other parties to go to.
Did you not have a good time with me last night?
Matthew?
Yes?
Can we just say that when a person picks up a pig at a date, that the New Year's kiss does not begin at 6:30 p.m.? Okay?
But look at this outfit. I was inspired.
I am exhausted.
And I think that, every once in a while, we will flip that if there's a joke that makes it worth it. We did another thing on the Today Show. We did a Today segment with Chris Maloney. And it was a little remote in the dressing room with Piggy and Chris Maloney.
Why exactly are you and I on the show to talk about relationships?
Oh, please, as if it's not obvious.
What's obvious?
Come now, the way you feel about Ma, the way you lust for me, the way you look at Ma as if dusting me for prints with your eyes. Oh.
Piggy, I have no idea what you're talking about.
We cut away and we cut back, and Piggy has wrapped him up in crime scene tape to try and keep him there. Yeah. So it's like, okay, in that particular instance, this was much later. This was an Eric Jacobson era. But it's like, okay, in this instance, because we're going for this visual, it's okay for Piggy to be, a little bit more, aggressive. So, yeah, and the thing is, that's the way that I approach it based on the way that Frank approaches it. Don't know if the current people involved take that particular tact. It's quite possible they do. Frank had a lot of sort of internal rules about Piggy. Some of them were flexible, some of them weren't.
So what were some of the rules?
One of the things he would ask if there was a request for Miss Piggy to do a television appearance or to do something is, would Barbra Streisand do it?
Meaning to keep her kind of classy?
Yeah. It was, we would get, for example, we got a request, to do Hollywood Squares.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was in the John Davidson era. And that would be, Frank would say, do you want Piggy to do Hollywood Squares? Can you do Hollywood Squares? And he said, would Barbra Streisand do Hollywood Squares?
Yeah.
Or like, no.
So you said no to that?
Later, at that point, later on, I think she did do Hollywood Squares.
Yeah, she did a bunch of times.
Yeah. And I think that's just sort of a different, I don't know how much of it was because of the character and how much of it was because Frank didn't want to sit under a box for 5 shows and keeping his arm up for 5 half-hour shows. But, the rules were, it was always about just trying to keep things funny. Mm-hmm. If you would write something for Frank, and this goes for anything, he would always try and make it half as long, make it twice as funny. It was about trying to find the funny moments and the character points. But also there were rules that ended up getting broken. For years and years, Miss Piggy would wear lavender gloves with a ring and pearls. And that was sort of the rule. And the pearls were there to hide the seam where the neck meets the body. And the gloves were there so you don't know if she has hands or hooves. And that was the reason that, also when Miss Piggy didn't wear open-toed shoes. Miss Piggy would, if she wore a hat, one ear usually was poking out. Right. It was important about keeping her a pig. So one day I was going with Frank to the Henson Workshop. We were getting ready to do a couple of days of appearances. I think it may have been for the cookbook. Not
so it would be like 96?
Yeah. We went over to the shop. We're looking at the outfits that have been selected. And Barbara Davis, dear woman, late Barbara Davis, who was one of Miss Piggy's designers for many years, said, if she didn't have to wear these lavender gloves, we'd have a lot more flexibility in the colors we could put her in. And Frank said, well, she doesn't have to wear lavender gloves. And everybody's jaws dropped. And Frank's like, yeah, she can wear any color gloves, as long as she's wearing gloves.
Yeah.
So everybody, was like, oh my God, a whisper going on. And we were, a week later, I was in the shop and Barbara by then had made like 40 or 50 pairs of different gloves, animal print and different pastel colors, bright colors, fluorescent, you name it. And from that point on, Piggy wore gloves of any color.
So everyone was just very excited with a lot more to have a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, because they take the fashion of Piggy very seriously and they want to make sure that she matches. And so they were always trying to match the gloves. But on that same day, we, looking at different pig hairstyles, someone who was doing the hair said, oh, it looks so beautiful. It's a shame we have to put those ears on. And Frank's like, well, don't put the ears on. And everybody, what? So if you look at one or two TV appearances from that era, I think it may have been on The View.
I remember,
there was a lot of talk.
That look. Yeah.
Because Frank,
it was Good Morning America, or it was,
I think it may have been
The
Today
View.
Show. It was one of those. It was an East Coast TV appearance. And I think we may have done like a video junket with that too. But it was like one day. It was one day of this because people couldn't take it. The whole world ended. Like, where's Miss Piggy's ears? And Frank's logic was women always do uncomfortable and painful things for the sake of their appearance. They will squeeze their feet into shoes that don't fit. They will, get themselves into a foundation garment that's uncomfortable. So his thinking was that her ears are just sort of pasted down under her hairstyle, and
Yeah.
that's what she's doing. But some people thought that we forgot the ears, but it was a specific choice. And I think there were people within Henson that thought that the ears were forgotten, because here's the secret of Miss Piggy is that the ears are not part of the puppet. The ears are these foam ears that have little pointy forks sticking out of them. And once the hairstyle is done, you just sort of stick in the ears and the forks go into the foam.
Right.
It's a lot easier to, do the hairstyling when you don't have to do it around the ears sticking out. So that was a rule break that did not last, but the gloves did.
Something that's funny about that story is how much Frank was in charge of that decision, in charge of kind of what Miss Piggy does and how she looks, and could kind of make a new rule just kind of by saying it out loud.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is that was his character. He, while it was property of the Henson Company, and he had more to do with the long-term development of that character than anyone else. And by that time, Jerry Jewell was not working full-time for the company. We still had access to him. We'd run stuff by him. But it was not like he was there to guide the vision of a character. And Frank did that. And he would write memos, about, what he saw the character doing. And when I wrote the Miss Piggy cookbook with Allison Inches from the publishing department at Henson, and Frank came in and spent, a day with us talking about what Miss Piggy's cookbook should be. And he was very emphatic about the fact that Miss Piggy should never actually discuss cooking herself, because she doesn't cook. She doesn't know how.
Yeah, that was in Miss Piggy's Guide to Life. There was a kind of a whole section on the most important thing in the kitchen is the telephone. So you can call for delivery.
So that was, and we actually said it on the Today Show, Miss Piggy, why did you want to write a cookbook? And it's like, well, I figured it'd be great publicity to get all my celebrity friends to send me recipes, and I'd get in a book. And that was, that's the approach Miss Piggy would take. So that's what he wanted to make sure that Miss Piggy's material in the cookbook reflected that. And it was more about, it was okay for her to talk about seating arrangements at dinner, or
her relationship with that celebrity.
Exactly. But Frank had a lot to say. Sometimes he didn't have a lot to say, where we just sort of wanted him to say more. Yeah. But he had a very close relationship with the character, and I certainly found that trying to think about her in the way that he saw her was really the way to be successful in writing for her. In his mind at that time, Miss Piggy was not a big star, but she thought she was a big star. Now, in reality, I think the reality is that she was a bigger star than Frank wanted us to think she was, because it's funnier when she gets deflated. I think that nowadays, Miss Piggy is treated as more of an actual superstar than someone who is a legend in her own mind. Right. And I think...
Like she goes on RuPaul's Drag Race, and everyone just cheers and is so excited to see her.
And I did a segment with her for Project Runway. And, the designers were thrilled to be designing for Miss Piggy, an amazing superstar. And it was, and this was in the Eric Jacobson era, and it was a lot of fun. But it was, I think that in the earlier incarnation, it would have been, positioned as this is, something that losers get to do, is design a dress for Miss Piggy. Right. But this was, I think that it's in today's celebrity age, it kind of makes sense for Piggy to actually be an actual celebrity.
Why is that?
Well, I think that part of it is that to do it the other way is a little more subtle, and you don't necessarily have the time to make that joke work. And I think you do, if you look at the sitcom, the Muppets sitcom, she was seriously a late night host.
Right.
She wasn't someone who created her own show and was airing it on YouTube and trying to convince people that it was a network thing. It was an actual network show. So to do it in the way that Miss Piggy was thought of in that earlier era, it's a complicated thing to sell, and you don't always have the time because people are not watching it for a half hour.
So one thing that I think there's sort of a transition that was made where she becomes explicitly like a diva. Like first she was a superstar in her own mind, and the focus was on how great she was and kind of is she actually good at doing this, and kind of moving into diva, it's more about how difficult she is.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting things is, and this is sort of a cultural shift that has also happened, part of the joke of the earlier Miss Piggy things is that she's not, she thinks she's great. Part of that joke was that she wasn't really good at anything. She was not a great singer. She's not a dancer. She, acts okay. But that was the joke, is that she thinks she's a great star, but she's not good at anything. Nowadays, you don't have to be good at anything to be an enormous star. So
Right.
I
You
think
just
it's
show
not
up.
necessarily that Piggy has changed.
Yeah.
I think culture has changed around her, where you have all of the Real Housewives and all of these people on television who don't have to be good at anything. And I'm not intending to slam them. I'm not saying they're not good at anything. I'm just saying they don't have to be. No one is requiring that of them.
Yeah.
The Real Housewives don't have to be great singers or dancers or actors. They just have to be divas. They have to be, for lack of a better word, difficult. That's what their attention is all about. So in some ways, I don't think that Miss Piggy has changed. I think the culture around her has changed. And it's just sort of just now when I'm thinking about it, it's sort of coming to me that that's why it's more real now, because the world has caught up to Miss Piggy.
Let's talk some more about working with Frank. One thing that has always been interesting for me is, I knew that the print interviews, obviously, that somebody was writing them. But what about live appearances? Like when she goes in and goes on a talk show, as you were talking about, like she's talking to Matt Lauer, how much is scripted before Frank comes in? And how much is sort of ad-libbed on the spot?
Well, a lot is scripted. How much of that gets used is totally up to Frank. What will happen is when we know that there's an appearance going to happen, I will, or I did, or Jim or whoever else is doing it. Usually what happens, you'll get in touch with the producers over there. You figure out what is being introduced. And then I will also know what is trying to be promoted. What are Henson or Disney or whoever, what are they trying to get out of this? And then we'll create a rough script, questions and answers. Also,
and so you're giving the host sort of, here are some feed lines for questions.
Yeah. Well, and in any other talk show appearance, what will happen is they'll do a pre-interview when a human goes on a talk show. So this process is sort of in place of a pre-interview. If Tim Allen's going on a talk show, usually Tim Allen will talk to one of their segment producers about, what he's going to, it's like, oh, this happened to me the other day, be fun to talk about.
Right. And then they figure out kind of like what are the actual interesting stories that go someplace.
Yeah. And then those questions will be given to the host, and, so Tim Allen knows exactly what's going to be asked, or roughly. And so that's what I do. Instead of him talking to Miss Piggy or to Frank, they'll talk to me. I'll figure out some stuff. Then I'll run it by Frank. And if I have not come up with an attitude or a concept for the overall piece, Frank will then discuss that with me. And he might say, well, maybe Miss Piggy needs to get someplace. Or, she is just, they never got back to her about something else. Or,
Yeah.
And then I'll work that into the script. And what Frank wants to do, he wants to get to a point where he's not using a script. He doesn't want to feel constrained. So what he would do then is go through, he'll circle sort of the punchlines that he wants to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'll take a 3x5 index card and he'll write those lines, on like one card. He will basically condense my 3 or 4 page script into one card. He'll tape that onto his knee.
Oh, wow.
Because he doesn't want to have to be dealing with multiple pages and scripts and stuff.
Yeah.
And then he'll do it. And he will hit those gags. And
but also
anything else,
he's there live to actually interact in the moment.
Yeah. So he knows, we had done shows where they wanted to handle it on more word for word, and Frank pushed back and said, I think when you're doing a show like that day in and day out, a lot of times the producers want their host to feel as comfortable as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But
want things to go very smoothly. Yeah,
but a Miss Piggy interview kind of is best when the host is as uncomfortable as possible. That Miss Piggy's taking it in completely different places and the host doesn't know where she's going. And that's kind of what Frank wanted to do. And sometimes we would get pushback from the shows that wanted to try and script it a little more clearly, but more often than not, they booked Miss Piggy because they wanted to get Miss Piggy, and that's what you got. And I don't know how it is done these days. I've done a bunch of things with Eric, but and a few things with Disney, but Disney kind of wants to script things out a lot more ahead of time. So all of the different powers that be can make sure that nothing is going to, bring down the mighty Disney.
And so Eric, you think often goes in with more of a script than Frank would?
I think he probably goes in with more of a script, but I'm not saying he always necessarily has, sticks to it. The performers are still sort of the final editorial process in all of this.
I remember just one of the most memorable. 1996 was such a weird year, I think, for Piggy and for Frank. They were doing Muppets Tonight and Muppet Treasure Island and the Cookbook all in the same year. So he was, we're doing a lot of Piggy interviews, and it seemed like Piggy was just really losing her patience.
Yeah. One of the things that I would love to do, and the other thing that I'll talk about this first is that, we would do these virtual junkets, where you would go into a television studio. Now people do it at home over Zoom, but when you used to go into a little television studio and they would line up about a dozen or more different news outlets across the country that would then interview Piggy over satellite. So we did it for like the Cookbook or something. So we would write roughly, we could reuse some of these things.
Right, because it was going to be shown in different parts of the country.
Yeah, it was going to be in different markets. And if it was, sometimes you'd get like Entertainment Tonight would do it over the junket, so you'd do something special for them. But just imagine that we were there for like 3 or 4 hours, and Miss Piggy's doing essentially the same interview and over again. So yeah, Frank's going to have fun with it. He's going to, make fun of the names of the people and he'll say them over and over again. He'll get a thing going. He's trying to keep it so it's fun, because while people are not going to see, because they're in different markets, in Frank's mind, he doesn't want it to be the same thing over and over again because he wants to be fresh. He wants to keep it fresh. It's one of the things that, we would do. We did a Martha Stewart special. We did a couple of Martha Stewart specials, and I wrote great stuff about him making fun of Martha, because you're in a situation where Miss Piggy can say what everybody else watching is saying.
Do you like that one? Little incy beansy?
I need my glasses to see that.
Well, look, this is what I do with this. You cut a star shaped out of the center of a larger cookie, so you have a nice hole in it.
Oh, how obsessive.
You can really have fun with it. But Frank sometimes would use these great lines during a rehearsal, and he would have, he wanted to come up with different things, because was trying to. This was a show not shot in front of an audience. They're in Martha Stewart's barn someplace.
She's making a gingerbread house.
Yeah, but he's trying to get the crew to laugh. That's sort of, I think that's part of the game he plays, is that the crew's not supposed to laugh.
Yeah.
They're in the middle of Martha's barn. He wants the crew to laugh. He wants people at home to hear this crew laughing. So if he does it during the rehearsal, he wants something else. So, and he would say it. He would say me, I didn't go up for that shoot, but he, called me afterwards and he said, "Oh, you had some great stuff. It was great. It killed during the rehearsal, but I didn't use it for the show, because I didn't want to repeat it." And it's like, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
But that's in him. He's kind of performing for the crew. He doesn't want to give them the same material twice.
Well, one memorable one for the cookbook was Regis and Kathie Lee.
Yes.
Which I love, where she basically just got into she brawled. Basically.
I will tell you the story behind that.
Excellent.
So we're getting ready to do this, and we had invited Kathie Lee to do a recipe for the cookbook, and she didn't. Either that or her people didn't get back to us. And I told that to Michael Gelman, the producer. And he's like, "Oh, don't mention it. You shouldn't mention it.
So
you'll get her started. Don't mention it." And I'm like, "I'm fine. I'll tell Frank." And I told Frank the backstory. And it's like, we invited Kathie Lee to do the cookbook, and she said no. But the producer said we shouldn't mention that. And Frank's like, "Okay." So we're doing the thing, and God bless Regis. He's just doing the cooking. He's like, because Piggy can't do anything. She's got her rod hands. And even if she did have working hands, she wouldn't want to touch any of his food.
Yeah.
So Regis is going through the recipe, and in the middle of it, Kathie Lee pipes up, or I think she might have, I don't know if it was during that segment or in the intro during host chat, but she starts talking about how offended she was that they didn't ask her to be in the celebrity cookbook. And it's like,
did Gelman have just as much trouble getting Miss Piggy's apron on this morning as he did Dolly's? Did he help you, Miss Piggy? She's not talking.
Are you insulting me?
No, not at all. I happen to like you very, very much.
No, there was nothing personal. I think we went through your people.
Oh, you went through her people, yes. My people, you talk right to me.
I did not
well,
know.
that's all right, Miss Piggy. You're forgiven. You're forgiven. We don't
okay,
care. That's
honestly.
okay. She'll get over it.
You know what,
She's
dears?
gotten over bigger than that.
Who cares?
So she was picking a fight then.
yeah, she was picking a fight. And I go up to Gelman during a commercial, and I'm assuming that we can talk about it now.
Right.
And he's like, "Be my guest," So I went to Frank and said, "You can go at it," So the segment sort of descends into this thing where we did invite you. No one told me, and it was like,
Celebrity Cooking Week continues, yes, and here she is, Miss Piggy, everybody, our chef for today.
Thank you.
The wonderful collection of recipes.
Thank you. From Omaha's dear friends.
Yes.
Major stars.
I know. Don't rub it in.
My dearest friends.
I know.
My closest friends. Very good friends.
All right.
and during that whole thing, Regis is still just trying to make the recipe. And then, so Miss Piggy is yelling at him. It's like, "You're still doing this."
Can I ask you a question?
Sure, shoot.
Are you married to Kermit the Frog?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, we're very happy.
How long have you been married?
Years.
I thought you were just boyfriend and girlfriend.
It was really none of your business, was it?
All right, so you cook some vegetables and you grill them, okay? Now what do I do here?
I have no idea.
Okay, all right. I'm mixing now. Okay,
What are you doing?
first we're going to use two tablespoons of
No
lemon
one told me we were going to cook.
Yeah, we're cooking Candace's recipe.
Oh.
2 tablespoons of lemon juice.
Yeah.
Here's 1 tablespoon of lemon zest. What?
You know what?
What?
I couldn't care less about this recipe.
So at the end of the day, when you're doing any sort of Muppet talk show appearance, you want it to be entertaining.
Yeah.
You want it to be, it's not just, I'm going to come and talk and show a clip and that's it. We always went into it trying to create a unit of entertainment. We wanted something to be funny. We wanted something to be visual. And certainly that segment ended up being that. It was not what we planned. But thanks to Kathie Lee complaining about, and she was genuinely a little chagrined at the end because someone didn't tell her that she had been invited to do this.
Oh, okay.
Her people turned it down, and so yeah, it was a lot of fun. But what we also did during that thing, we did this very elaborate Today Show appearance with the whole cast of the Today Show sitting around a table, because when we were planning out this book, we're like, oh, if we invite every single person on the Today Show to contribute a recipe, there's no way they wouldn't do a big segment to promote it. So that's what they did, because we had Brian Gumble and Katie and Gene Shalit, everybody, Willard Scott, everybody in a row talking about the things. And they devoted like 15 or 20 minutes to us, and they built a whole set.
Oh, my gosh.
So yeah, it was successful.
So interesting that you feel like you have to plus the appearance.
Well, it's not that we feel we have to. I think.
Well, I think that's a goal that
we
you
feel
and
that there's an expectation in the audience to be entertained by the Muppets.
Right.
They don't want to hear an interview. They want a little something more. If they want an interview, just anybody will do. But if we're doing, you got the Muppets, let's do something more special.
Something special. Yeah.
So we did, we've done things where we've taken over the Today Show, where we had, Muppet versions of the main hosts come in and take over. And we had, one of my favorite bits, this is something that Bill Beretta sort of ad-libbed. And it was, the bit was Bobo, Matt Lauer, and I think it was Ann Curry and whoever else was doing it at the time. They were trying to get back into the studio, and Bobo was the guard.
Everybody just take a breath.
We have to get there.
I understand. We have regulations.
We got a show to do here.
I understand, sir. Now, is this your current address, Mr. Lawyer?
It is.
Lauer.
Okay. Is this your current address, Mr. Lawyer?
Lauer. It's Lauer.
Is this your current address, Mr. Lawyer?
Lauer.
Matt Lauer.
I can't say it any louder than that.
Oh, man.
And they, Bill just dragged that out for like 2 minutes. So, yeah, I think that we go into it. We probably have a higher expectation than the audience, but I think the audience deserves to be entertained. And especially because most of these shows are just incredibly boring.
Super boring, yeah. There was another sort of in that same era, another kind of memorable set of interviews with Jay Leno. Those got very flirty.
Yeah. And one of the reasons is I think, when we were, I think Jim Lewis would cover a lot of those Burbank ones. But I think that Miss Piggy would be behind the desk with Jay, as opposed to on the other side, and that the proximity gives it a little bit more interaction.
Excuse me, is that your knee?
No, that's not my knee. No, yes, no.
But the one that I worked on in that era was the New Year's Eve. We did New Year's Eve, and the Tonight Show had Miss Piggy being the Times Square reporter.
Oh, yes.
On top of the roof of the Marriott Marquis.
I've seen that.
And I wrote material for it. We were up there. And Stephanie came along. My wife Stephanie came along because she was going to be there in case a right hand was needed. And Renee Rochelle, who was in production at the time. So it's just a bunch of us. And they...
Like actually on a roof?
Yeah. Well, they gave us a hotel room. And the window of the hotel room opened up onto this roof. And then, they didn't tell you is that everybody else also had to use this hotel room to get out to the roof. So, we're trying to just sort of sit in between things, and there were people just going back and forth.
Oh,
it's freezing outside.
Yeah.
And you're there right next to the people who are throwing out the confetti. And I wrote some material, and the thing that was really funny is that in Times Square on the big video screen, they would show these segments. They had the Tonight Show on the big video screen, but not the audio because you couldn't hear it. It had captioning. And we did a segment where...
Oh, by the way, Jay?
Yes?
I have a wonderful fun fact for you. About 1 million people are expected in Times Square tonight.
Yes?
85% of them are coming from outside New York. 15% of them are New Yorkers. And 100% of them are total wackos.
And it took a while for the caption to go up there. And we're waiting and waiting. And as soon as Absolutely Crazy goes up, you hear the audience down below go, but that was live. We were doing that live. On that year, and I think a few years, Jay used to do that, where they would do their show live.
Mm-hmm.
And out, it's 3 hours ahead of time. So they could do it at 9.
Right.
8:30 or whatever. And then it was midnight where we were. Writing material. But the best thing that, even more creative than that was the fact that it was just so cold.
Yes.
And Miss Piggy reacting
coming
to the
out
cold.
in that moment.
Yeah.
How are you doing there exactly? Where are you?
Where am I?
Yeah.
I'm on top of a building in the middle of the night, Jay. How do you think I am? I'm freezing my pajonkas off.
What part of the pig is the bajanka? Well, never mind. Now, let me ask you something.
You don't want to know.
What does the crowd look like?
It looks dangerous, Jay.
Yeah.
Right now they're passing Dick Clark around over their heads.
Really?
And just that Frank wanted so badly to get back inside to the room.
Yeah.
So that was what was really coming through
in
in Piggy,
And so funny that she would react it was a very Piggy reaction.
Oh, yeah. But it was a pretty high profile thing for Piggy. And I think it was a great use of her. But it was really cold.
I've always wondered about Frank's availability during various periods, because sometimes he would show up, like, even he'll be on the Today Show, he'll be on Jay Leno sometimes when there isn't anything to promote, but also but he's like, how did it work as he became busier and busier with his non-Piggy work?
Well, it would always be whether or not he was available, and I think that sometimes, we would go, he would go into these projects. He knew that when we were doing the cookbook, he would need to be supporting it at some point, and so he knew that there was going to be a certain number of appearances. Frank also, more often than not, when he was directing films, he directed in New York most of the time.
Mm.
He always wanted to run his shows out in New York. And if he was directing a movie in L.A., then we'd sometimes have access to him to do the L.A. shows.
And he really enjoyed still kind of coming back to the puppets, coming back to these characters.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. When you don't have to do it every day, you enjoy doing it once in a while.
Right. So besides live appearances, what other kinds of things were you writing?
Well, I was doing the video game stuff, the early CD-ROM games. Yeah. I did the Muppet Treasure Island and the Muppets Inside.
I love that game, Muppets Inside.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was fun for me because no one else knew what it was supposed to be, so I didn't get a lot of notes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they didn't understand the whole thing of the branching game and all these different options. And I was working for Michael Frith at the time, and I gave him the script to read. And it's like, well, it seems okay, but there's an ending on page 7, and then it goes on for another 130 pages, but I don't quite understand. I had to sort of explain it. So because people didn't understand, it was very new at the time. That was since 1995 we were doing that.
Yeah.
People let me get away with a lot of stuff.
And it's so funny. It's really, it's a shame. It's always been a shame that people were not able to, like, if they didn't have, I forget what the actual
Windows 95.
Windows 95.
Yeah.
They couldn't see what was basically a real Muppet Show product or real Muppet production.
Yeah, that was so much fun. And the way that was done, both the Muppets Inside and the Muppet Treasure Island CD-ROM stuff was all shot around the same time when they were doing the Muppet Treasure Island movie. And they set up a little stage across the street from the soundstage, or across the alley from the soundstage where they were doing most of the movie. And whenever anybody was not working, they were brought over to shoot their stuff for these CD-ROM games. And I stayed in New York. I didn't go over for it, but they had me on call. I had to work for I had to sort of be on call on London hours in New York in case they did.
You're working London time.
So yeah, and this was before before there was anything like Zoom where you could actually dial in. So I was just faxing things back and forth. But it was a lot of fun. I love those projects. So I would do those. I did products, licensed products. The cards that would go with the Miss Piggy collectibles, or the backs of the Mead notebooks.
Like trading card, the back of trading cards.
I did all the
things.
trading cards, yep.
Yeah.
I did the song parodies, the posters. There's a poster on your wall that I wrote for the Gap parody and the Beatles parody and a bunch of those.
For the trading cards, there's like Super Beaker and Cleopatra, which are so funny, which have so many funny jokes in them, and totally makes sense that you were writing that.
What we would do for those, they basically, we would reuse a lot of material that had been shot for Muppet Magazine or Hallmark or any of these other clients. So it was basically, they had a new shoot that they would do these beautiful sort of the portraits. And I think some of the more recent music parodies, like Bunsen was doing.
Garth Brooks.
Garth Brooks. So some of those were shot, and then we'd go through and it's like, okay, we're going to incorporate the Kermitage collection into the trading cards, so we can write new material for that. So it was a matter of, these photos cost an enormous amount of money to shoot. So how can you do a series of 80 or however many trading cards when you can't afford to shoot more than a dozen or 20 photos? So that's when
they had to kind of go to the back catalog.
Yeah. And we did that a lot. When we would do posters for the Muppet Vision down in Florida, we did these posters for the pre-show. And Jim Lewis and I did a lot of these where we'd repurpose some of the calendars, the old movie parody calendars. So we did. So
there was like a top hat.
Yeah, and we did a Tarzan thing. We wouldn't, we had to reformat it because these were big vertical posters. Right. And so we couldn't use the actual poster designs, but the photography was reused. And one of my favorite lines that I came up with was for the Tarzan one with Kermit and Miss Piggy, and I wrote, "She's Hollywood, he's Vine." Thank you very much. And the thing is, with those posters and the trading cards, that's where you can really do the jokes and the puns and things, where I would not want to do that in dialogue,
right?
In a script or in a TV appearance. And when you're doing a TV appearance or a script of a show or something, you want the comedy to come out of character, and that really makes a difference. But when you're relying solely on a still image and a written word, let's do a parody song. Let's do, you can have more fun with the words in that way.
Going back to Miss Piggy, how was he viewed in the company? Like, obviously in the late 70s and early 80s, she was a huge star and was viewed as like being super important. She actually like separate from the Muppets and more important. Did the feelings about Miss Piggy change over time?
I don't think so. I think she was always seen as sort of the big star of that group in terms of, in licensing, they could do a beautiful collector's doll of Miss Piggy. Right. And they did that New Year's Eve Millennium one out of ceramic, and they could do the posters and they can do the calendars, and you don't see, or at least at that point in time, you didn't see it coming with the other characters that much. They knew that Miss Piggy still had this enormous following in a way that the other characters didn't. I think that Miss Piggy was also seen as sort of the adult character. while a lot of these other characters were sort of targeted in their merchandise to kids, Miss Piggy had an adult fan base, and they could do the more upscale things with her. So I think that she was seen in a very positive way in the company, and it was always about how do we get Frank to do what we need? You know, how can we do this? Because the merchandise would more often than not need the support from Frank to do it. And it was not whether or not he wanted to. It was about trying to make things work with his schedule. They did a great deal to do Miss Piggy's perfume. And since then, they've had another Miss Piggy perfume. But they had done Moi with Bloomingdale's. And I wrote a script for a video, and we needed Frank to come in for the video. And we tried to make it, you know, we shot a lot of elements without Frank, because some of these things were just close-ups of Miss Piggy's hand holding a mirror, or, you know, a flip of a hair, or just a close-up of an eye. So we could have another puppeteer just double while we did these little elements. And then Frank came, you know, swung by for an hour to do the main punchline. And then we did a little like in-store video where he's talking to the thing. But, you know, we had to also keep it in a way where it fit in with what Frank's thinking. So this was a video I think was being shown to the Bloomingdale's sales team. And in Frank's mind, it's like, well, why isn't Miss Piggy there? So we had a green screen set up, and we had a little bit of a railing from like a ship. And, you know, we had Piggy standing in front talking about how she's on the ship and all that stuff and couldn't be with you, blah, blah, blah. And in the middle of the talking, we just had stagehands move the green screen out of the way, revealing the back of the studio. So she, you know, it's the way of just sort of making it, okay, Piggy just didn't come. You know, it's not like she's on a ship. She's somewhere. You know? So that's, you know, we could do that.
Yeah, she always has a storyline.
Yeah, and I think that's that makes her special. You know, Piggy is just an amazing character in so many ways. And one of the things that people don't really think about it is that before the Muppets, and Frank told me about this, and you know, his family goes back into puppetry for years and years. And Frank told me once, you know, when you think about it, before Jim Henson and the Muppets, a puppet never changed clothes. You know, your Punch and Judy would be dressed that way forever. Howdy Doody, they have their uniform on. And when you think about it, the fact that, you know, Miss Piggy has such a vast wardrobe, that's what makes her real. You know, I remember I would call up the costume people at the workshop when we were going to do one of these appearances, and I'd say, Barbara, you know, we're doing The View or something like that. And I'd say, what does she have to wear? And Barbara would always say the same thing. She's got nothing to wear. I'm like, Barbara, what? I've seen her closet. Miss Piggy's closet used to take up the, you know, third floor wall of the carriage house, 3 levels high. Oh my God. There was this enormous closet with everything from every piece of clothing she ever wore. But no matter, you know, because they would always want to make something new.
Do a new thing, right? Because that's what Miss Piggy would say.
Yeah. And it was a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's what kept her real all these years.
Can you tell me about the transition to Eric?
You know, I don't know how Eric was selected, but I do know that it had happened around 2002, I think. We were getting, or 2001. It was the end of 2001, because we were getting ready to do Muppet Fest. And Frank said that he couldn't do Muppet Fest. I think he had another commitment.
So this was, for folks, like, this was the only Muppet fan convention that ever happened. It was a wonderful 2 days. I was there. All these puppeteers with their characters performing live in front of a group of very excited fans.
Yeah, and so Eric, I think at that point was just getting ready. He was practicing. I don't think he had really done anything of note. But we did not feel it was fair to him to put him in front of this group of specific Henson fans for his first appearance as Miss Piggy to do it live.
Yeah.
So we said, well, let's put Miss Piggy into the Muppet Fest event and into the live show, but let's do it on video. So a few weeks ahead of time, we went, and I think we shot this in Emilio Delgado's dressing room at Sesame Street because that's where Eric was working. So we all went over there and we set up a camera and we did these little bits. We think we did like 3 or 4 bits. We did one bit for the live show we're going to interrupt Brooke Shields. And we did a couple of introductory things for the Muppet Fest.
I'm sorry I couldn't make it to the event. I'm very busy. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly. And what was wonderful about it is that I did not hear anyone talk about it not being Frank.
I actually, on the Tough Pigs forum, I was swearing up and down that it must have been Frank because it sounded so good. And why would they show, a brand new person in front of the fans? And I really believe that.
Yeah, I think Eric did an amazing job.
Yeah.
And he continues to do an amazing job. But, when we did that particular thing for Muppet Fest, they were all very strictly scripted because, especially with the live show, we were interacting. So they couldn't really, change it too much because we were going to be responding to it and we'd have to rewrite other parts of the show. So I think shortly after that, we were going to be doing the first Today Show appearance with Piggy and Eric. And when you're doing those appearances that are a little more spontaneous, it's like, okay, well, Eric can do this voice, but how is he thinking on his feet with the character?
Ad-lib, it's very difficult.
Yeah. And so what we did for that first one, I actually was under the desk with him and I had a little notepad so I could pass him notes during the thing. And I ended up not having to do it because, it was clear fairly early on that he could handle this.
So you were there just in case he got stuck.
Yeah. In case someone asked a question, because the thing that we are most concerned of, when you have characters, you have performers switching out, and I've gone through this with a few different people, is that you want to make sure that the characters still know what the character is supposed to know. If Matt goes on, is being interviewed by someone who had interviewed Kermit done by Steve, he's got to know if, in case that host says, hey, last time you were here, we talked about, what were we talking about? So that's what I'm most concerned about. It ended up not being an issue. I worked with Eric on a bunch of things since then, from the Project Runway to more recently the D23.
Oh gosh, so you're still doing this sometimes?
Now and then, I don't do a lot, but the D23 people hired me to produce the Muppet Christmas Carol 40th anniversary, or it's 30th. Yeah. It was 30th. They did an anniversary event at the D23. They hired me to sort of produce that, and what was wonderful is that I wrote that segment we did with the Muppets, and I wrote that with Jim Lewis, and it was right before Jim retired from doing regular Muppet stuff. So it was sort of our last big thing to do together. So I'm happy, it's like I am happy to do stuff when they call.
Right.
But,
it's kind of once in a while. Yeah.
If you're listening, I'm still here, guys. But yeah, every once in a while I'll do stuff. And what's really great is once you've done it, it's very easy to get back into the swing of it because we could, when we were doing the D23, and since then, Eric is sort of now he's the guardian of the pig.
Right.
And I written something where if you saw it, you can watch a little of it online. Nina West, the MC, she was wearing a green outfit with Kermit's face on it. And the first version of the script, I had Piggy saying, "You're wearing what I was going to wear. I'm not speaking to you." And Eric called me and said, "Listen, in where he is, Piggy's not quite to that point. She's not back to like with Kermit. They're still sort of on their break. So I don't think she would be upset that because she wanted to wear it. She might be upset that Nina is wearing Kermit and not Piggy on her dress.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like let's change that. Let's make it a little bit
kind
more.
of a subtle difference that actually really does make.
Yeah. So you could see that now Eric is really that, sort of custodian for the character to make sure that she's being taken care of. I worked with him on doing the Project Runway appearance where Miss Piggy's the judge, and Eric is such a nice person that he didn't want to say anything bad about the hard work that the people were doing. And we're like, well, it's Miss Piggy, it's like we had to come up with stuff that was funny but not too critical, because Eric didn't really want to, they worked so hard.
Yeah.
So we were trying to come up with stuff that was, sort of straddled the line.
So where did you go? Was it like, I imagine, talking about herself in the clothes more?
A little bit, yeah. And also it's like trying to, something, it's like, well, it looks like it's out of Starfleet Academy, where it's sort of not necessarily critical, but just sort of comparing it to other things. And but it was it was just an interesting experience to see how a show like that is put together.
Yeah.
Everything, when I was doing, you were either doing talk shows or scripted shows, and this was sort of like that in between. And then the physical stuff, we had Miss Piggy having to watch as the people would come down the runway.
Right.
Wearing the thing, and Miss Piggy's head would go from one side to the other as they followed. But of course, underneath Miss Piggy's chin, it could rub off the flocking. So Miss Piggy went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and we're like, oh my God, the flocking's coming off. So we had to change Piggy heads.
Oh gosh. So that's just not a thing that she can do. I didn't know that.
Well, it's a thing that anything that's repetitive like that is going to be a bad thing, so if Piggy is doing a lot of yelling and yelling and yelling, it's going to maybe open up a little bit of, just to get into the physical aspect of things. I don't know if did you talk to Bonnie or?
Yes. Yeah. We interviewed Bonnie.
I don't know how physical, how detailed she got into the physical elements, but everything is so specific and delicate and can change. And, it's like if the temperature is off on the day that they pour the mold on that batch of Miss Piggy's, it's going to affect the viscosity and the durability. I mean, it's a very, very sensitive process. So, they always travel with a couple of heads just in case. Just in case. Just swapped heads. But it's Piggy is very. It requires a lot of attention and upkeep. It's just the way it is.
What do you think about that change, about them breaking up? And I was surprised that can, like, I know that was done kind of as a setup for the sitcom, but I always figured that after that they would kind of forget about that and just go back to the usual.
Yeah, I think that
married relationship.
I think that's where it's going to end up. I think, but they sort of, the plug was pulled before they could really resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I wasn't involved in that show, but the feeling I got from watching it is that they were heading back in that direction.
Right. Yeah, that last episode.
Yeah. And I think if the show had continued, Piggy and Kermit would have gotten, if not together, they would have gotten closer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you need to have ups and downs in a relationship when you're showing this. You sort of, if it's just Miss Piggy and Kermit living happily ever after, there's not a lot of places to take that.
Right.
And it sort of followed up on what was being planned at the time of Jim's death. There was something called Pig of the 90s. I don't know if you've discussed that. And the idea was that Piggy broke up with Kermit. She realized she was in a codependent relationship. She loudly broke up with him. And they did the big thing on the Today Show. Yeah,
that clip has shown up on YouTube, and it's fantastic, where she actually just screams, "This isn't working," and storms out.
This is not the time to be talking about that stuff.
I think it's time to talk, and I think it's time to talk about us.
It's not time to talk about us, Piggy. We're here talking to Deborah about the talking.
Piggy.
I am trying to talk to my frog about something that I've been trying to talk to for a long time, which is I think it's not working between the two
Piggy,
of us.
don't. Piggy, we try not to get into this stuff right now.
Don't touch me!
Piggy,
Oh, Kermit! Oh, my gosh! Miss Piggy!
Yeah, that was supposed to be the beginning of a whole campaign. Now, part of it was a campaign to sort of bring Piggy back into the public consciousness for merchandising and publishing purposes and all that stuff. But because Jim passed away, they weren't able to really resolve that.
Right.
And by the time...
Because unfortunately, he died, I think, 2 weeks after that.
Yeah, it was very soon after.
Yeah.
And, and by the time Kermit was back up and performing about 6 months to 8 months later, it was not really, there was not really a way to revisit that because, it's like, what do? Do you have them break up again? Or did anybody remember they broke up? Or, it just didn't
and just
seem...
at a time when people are seeing Kermit
and
thinking so much about kind of losing Jim.
Exactly. So they really didn't take it in that. So I think that the sitcom was able to do that story in a way. The only sad thing is that they were not able to really resolve it satisfactorily.
I mean, it's amazing, actually, the way that you're talking about it as a continuing story, even though that sitcom ends, like then in later live appearances and things that you and Eric are thinking about this as, even if people only see a piece of this and a piece of that for you, it is still a continuing story.
Well, it's not necessarily for me. I'm not really involved in that other than what we talked about at D23. I think that it's important for a resolution to be earned. That it's, I think in the mind of the people who are doing the Piggy stuff now, they want to make sure that if they do return Piggy and Kermit to their original positions, which is still a little vague because Kermit never really talked about what his true feelings were. If they do return to that, they want to feel like the arc has been earned, that it's not just, everybody returns to where they started. It's not like, when we were doing it, sort of, when we were doing all of these CD-ROM games, Muppet Treasure Island and stuff, whenever, Billy Connolly was doing a thing to camera, he would talk, he would do it, then he would have to return his head to the exact same position that he started. Just because that you got to end where you finish because they're going to...
It's going to loop.
Edit. Right. And they're going to edit another thing into it, which starts at that same point. So it's not like that. You don't just necessarily return these characters to where they started. In order for them to remain real, you got to believe that the choices they're making and the positions that they're in their lives make sense and that they are real.
And unfortunately, we haven't had like a project that is big enough and long enough to really do that.
Yeah. And I think that any number of projects could accomplish that. And I think that one of the things that we had tried to do, Jim Lewis and I had written a pitch for at the time, this would have been like the late 1990s or early 2000s. There was a series, kind of like A&E biography, but Lifetime Intimate Portrait. And we were working on pitching a Miss Piggy Lifetime Intimate Portrait.
Oh, really?
You could do something like that, a Miss Piggy portrait or a documentary, like a little mockumentary, an hour thing, with enough backstage material to bring that Kermit Piggy story to a real resolution where you could create a new status quo. But I remember we had done a bunch of things and we ended up not doing it because we found out that Lifetime Intimate Portraits and A&E biographies had incredibly low budgets, like unbelievably low budgets. Like a 1 hour Lifetime Intimate Portrait was like $160,000.
Because they've just got they're just doing an interview.
Yeah, they do a couple of interviews,
showing old
they slap
clips
in some pictures. not even clips, because they would usually, couldn't afford actual clips. They'd use either movie trailers or,
That's low
it was
budget.
really
Okay.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we ended up not pursuing that, but I had talked to, I saw Bernie Brillstein at an event, and I was telling him about this, and he's like, "Oh, I'll do an interview." So we were going to have Bernie be,
Bernie the agent.
Piggy's agent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that you could do something like that. You could do any number of things, but it has to have enough sort of gravity,
right,
for enough people to see it, which is hard nowadays.
Yeah,
because
it's competing with so much for people's attention.
Yeah, it's hard for a lot of people to see any one thing nowadays. One of the other things that I am really interested in, I'm working on a book about, is Jack Benny.
Oh.
And it's a very similar dynamic when you think about it.
Yeah.
He created this persona which initially lived within his own radio and TV shows.
Mm.
And then he took it out into the world. And he could use that persona, and my book is about his guest appearances on other people's shows. And it is a situation that's not unlike Miss Piggy's, where, Benny took this same personality that he developed in his own show and could take it out on the road, could take it to other shows. He could take it to Flip Wilson or Smothers Brothers, and he could take it to Bachelor Father, or, appear with Lucy. And it's very similar, where you have this character that can endure on its own, taken out of the context of his regular cast of characters.
Yeah, so real to people.
Right, and that's this very similar thing with Miss Piggy. You can take her anywhere, and she can, enough people know about her and what she's supposed to be like, that she can interact with most anyone.
Are you working on any other Muppet books, Muppet projects?
I am. I'm glad you asked me that question,
All right.
Danny.
Fantastic.
I'm doing a follow-up to the Sam and Friends book.
Oh, really?
Yes. The Sam and Friends book, which is available through Bear Manor Media or Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com. I am doing a compilation of the Sam and Friends scripts that survive. So I'm taking about roughly 60 scripts that Jim and a few
things
that Jerry
that
Jewell
weren't
did.
That weren't in the original book.
Yeah, the original book only had about 5 scripts in it, and it had summaries of all the surviving episodes. But this is going to have Jim's full scripts for about 60 episodes, with my edits and annotations, and it'll give people a chance to see how Jim was really writing the show. And it'll be a combination. It'll be all transcribed, so it'll be easily read, but then we'll show a lot of images of what the original script pages look like.
And that means that the first book must have been a big success if you're able to go and do a follow-up.
It is, relatively speaking, in the Muppet fan community.
Within Bear Manor Media.
Yeah, I'm very happy I'm very proud of the book.
Yeah.
And the Henson Company and Disney has been very supportive, because they allowed me to do it without charging any sort of license fee, because it is a very niche book. I mean, it's a book about a show that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So it is a bit of a
and
hard
somebody
sell.
who people love, but possibly in a now a vague memory way.
Yeah, and people have really loved it. They've come up to me and said wonderful things about it. And it's gotten some great reviews, and the Henson family was very happy with it. But you don't get rich writing a book like that. But right. I wrote it because I wanted to tell the story. I wanted to tell the story for Jim's sake, but also for Jane, because she went out of her way to not take credit for anything.
Yeah.
But she deserved a lot of credit. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to write that book, is to sort of establish for the record that Jane had a lot to do with those early days. It was very important to the future of the Muppets, her role back then. So that's the follow up is the Sam and Friends script book. I'd love to do another book, talking a little bit with Karen Falk about a possible new book. And would love to be able to get some of the audio material from Sam and Friends out there, and that's a little more complicated.
Right.
For, legal and business reasons, but
yeah.
It's something I still want to have happen. So there are discussions that will continue. But for now, the Sam and Friends script book is underway. Hope to be out before the end of the year. But this was a lot of fun. I love talking about Miss Piggy. It was I consider myself very fortunate to have had a little role in working with her.
Well, this has been amazing. I've gotten so many insights behind the scenes, and you've answered some of the, the backstage story between some of the things that I've been wondering about for such a long time. Thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure. It really is.
So thanks again to Craig, and kissy, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Fantastic Miss Piggy podcast, brought to you by my friends at toughpigs.com. Coming up in the next episode, there's another interview, this time with Miss Piggy's original costume designer, the talented and magnetic Callista Hendrickson. I am so excited about that. You're going to love it. A big thank you to Joe Hennis and Tough Pigs for making my dreams come true, and special thanks to the editors of Muppet Wiki, who work every day to help you become a better Muppet fan. If you have comments or questions, or you know stuff about Miss Piggy that you'd like to share, you can write to me at fantasticmisspiggy@gmail.com. That's fantasticmisspiggy@gmail. And please do. It's been really nice hearing from people. I'm also on X at fantasticmisspiggy, or come and join us on the Tough Pigs Discord. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Gee, I'd like to see you looking swell, baby. Diamond bracelets Woolworth doesn't sell, baby. Till that lucky day, you know darn well, baby, I can't give you anything but love.